All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle one of the oldest and honestly one of the toughest questions in all of philosophy. It's a puzzle that's really stumped thinkers and believers for, well, thousands of years. And it's known as the problem of evil. So, at its heart, the whole problem is this really stark contradiction. On one hand, you've got this idea of a perfect, all good God. But then, on the other hand, you have the world we actually live in, a world that's just undeniably full of pain and suffering. So, the big question is, how can both of those things be true at the same time? That's the tension, right? And that's exactly what we're going to get into. Okay, to really get a grip on this problem, we first have to be super clear about the definition of God that philosophers are working with in this debate. It's not just any definition, it all boils down to three really specific key attributes. So first up, you have omnipotent. That just means all-powerful, able to do literally anything. Then you've got omniscient, which means all-knowing, aware of everything, past, present, and future. And finally, omnibenevolent. This one means perfectly good and all-loving. So you've got this being who is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good. You got to remember those three omnis, because they are literally the gears that make this whole philosophical engine turn. Okay, so now that we've got those three big attributes in our heads, let's see how philosophers take this from just a gut feeling into a real formal argument. They take that sense of contradiction we were talking about, and they build it into this tight, logical sequence. It's pretty clever. So let's just walk through the logic here. It really unfolds pretty simply. Step one, an all-loving God would want to prevent evil and suffering, right? Makes sense. Step two, an all-powerful God would be able to prevent it. Again, seems logical. But then step three, evil and suffering obviously exist. You just have to look around. So what's the conclusion they draw from this? Well, it's that a God with all three of those perfect traits simply cannot exist. The pieces just don't fit together. And this is what makes the argument so compelling, It's not just an emotional outcry, like, why do bad things happen to good people? It's a cold, hard claim about a logical contradiction. The argument is basically saying that the idea of a perfect God and the reality of evil, well, they're like a square circle. It's not that they're unlikely to exist together, it's that they logically cannot exist together. But of course, the conversation doesn't just stop there. Not by a long shot. For centuries, you've had brilliant philosophers and theologians pushing back with some really powerful defenses. And these attempts to kind of reconcile the idea of a good God with all the evil in the world, well, they actually have a special name. And that name is a theodicy. It sounds a little academic, but a theodicy is basically just an argument that tries to justify God's existence in the face of all this suffering. It's an attempt to show that actually there isn't a logical contradiction and that there might be a very good reason why a perfect God would allow evil to exist. Now, of all the theodicies out there, the most famous one, by far, is what's called the free will defense. And it's a really elegant argument that does something clever. It shifts the blame for a lot of the world's suffering. So here's the core idea. The argument is that a world with truly free creatures is just better than a world full of puppets or robots that are just programmed to be good. I mean, think about it. Genuine love, real kindness, those things can't be forced, can they? For them to mean anything, you have to have the freedom to choose the opposite. The freedom to choose evil has to be on the table. So the argument goes, God couldn't create beings that are both genuinely free and simultaneously forced to only do good. That's a logical impossibility. And the takeaway? Well, all the evil that comes from our choices, that's on us, not God. And that sounds like a pretty powerful counterargument. It seems to explain a lot about why humans cause so much pain. But does it really explain everything? Because the free will defense runs headfirst into a pretty major challenge. I mean, just think about it for a second. What does human free will have to do with an earthquake? Or a disease, like a child getting cancer? Or a tsunami that wipes out a whole town? These kinds of things have nothing to do with human choice. They seem to be baked into the very fabric of nature itself. And this brings us to a really crucial distinction that philosophers make. On one side, you have what they call moral evil. That's all the bad stuff caused by human actions. War, cruelty, things like that. The free will defense is aimed squarely at that. But then on the other side, you have natural evil. This is the suffering caused by natural processes, floods, plagues, you name it. And that is the part of the puzzle where the free will defense really starts to struggle. So where does all this leave us? Well, it leaves us smack in the middle of this huge, unresolved philosophical debate. You've got these really powerful arguments on one side and some really compelling counter-arguments on the other. It's a real intellectual tug-of-war. All right, let's just do a super quick recap of the journey we've been on. First, we had the main argument. The existence of any evil seems to make a perfect God logically impossible. Then we had the defense. Human free will is a greater good, and that explains away all the moral evil. But then there's the complication. What about natural evil? That's the piece that just doesn't seem to fit neatly into the defense. And it's so important to get this. What we've just covered is really just the tip of the iceberg. This is just the entry point. From here, the whole debate spirals into even deeper, tougher questions. Like, what if our whole understanding of good is just too limited? Or what if suffering actually serves some kind of purpose that we just can't possibly comprehend? The puzzle, believe it or not, only gets more complex from here. So, we're going to end with the one question that just continues to echo through philosophy. Is it possible that all this suffering isn't some kind of cosmic mistake or a flaw in the system? What if, in ways we can't possibly understand, it's actually a necessary, even if incredibly painful part of some greater good that's just beyond our grasp? Now, there is no easy answer to that, not at all. And it's a question that really forces us to think about the deepest mysteries of our existence.